Hey everyone, Ken Ingalls here, back with another salary cap video for the Green Bay Packers. And today I am going to answer the question I received the most this entire offseason, and that is, what are the Packers going to do with Aaron Banks' contract? He is the top signing of the Green Bay Packers from the 2025 season, and his contract has a lot of questions around it, especially in the nature of the Packers needing to get under the salary cap. So I'll dig in, show you kind of all the options, and give you my thoughts on what I think the Packers are going to do heading into this 2026 season. So let's go ahead and dive in directly into the contract, which for me, this contract, when I look at it and I see it, it's pretty simple, like most Packers contracts are, but it's unique in a few ways. So let's just start at let's take a step back. What are we looking at here? He received a 4-year, $77 million contract, which averages out to be $19.25 million per year. Thing that stands out is a $27 million signing bonus, which is pretty significant for the Packers. They typically give large signing bonuses, but for an interior offensive lineman, that is quite substantial. And for salary cap purposes, that's $6.75 million over 4 years of the contract. Remember, signing bonuses can be spread up to 5, but there are only 4 years in this contract, and there were no voids put into this contract. So that spread is over 4 years. What sticks out to me, though, when I'm looking at this is the cash amounts. And while it's very common with Packers contracts that the first year cash is very high, again, usually due to a pretty significant signing bonus, year 2 is really what jumps out to me. Normally, year 2 cash on a Packers veteran contract like this is going to be significantly lower in year 2 and then jump up in year 3 and jump up in year 4. And this is doing the exact opposite, which is very, very unique. Let's look at Zach Tom, who was also signed in 2025. You can see, similar kind of structure, large signing bonuses. His was a 4-year extension, 4 years added on to the 2025 year. So it is a 4-year extension. That's how it will be measured. And they gave him 88 million additional onto his existing 3.4 for $22 million a year. But look at the cash, right? Year 1, 31 million, 31.5 million, not bad. Year 2, 6. And then jumps up to 11, jumps up to 18, jumps up to 24. This is a very typical Packers contract. And again, this is for another offensive lineman signed in the exact same year. So when I go, and here's another thing to look at. The first 2 years of cash, which is a kind of a key metric that agents are really looking at and fighting for, Zach Tom is getting $37.5 million as an offensive tackle through the first 2 years. You take a look at Aaron Banks and you look at his first 2 years, 47.5. So Aaron Banks is making $10 million more in the first 2 years of his contract than Zach Tom, who is playing a more premium position and is a much better player. So when I read this and I look at this contract, what this tells me is that Brian Gutekunst really wanted this guy. He kind of broke the norm, and the agent was probably pounding the table trying to get more cash, and there's maybe some other offers out there other than Green Bay running their own market that probably led and drove this up. So I look at this, they really wanted this player. They really wanted Aaron Banks to come in. We heard some things in the offseason about the Packers coming out of that Philadelphia playoff game, getting pushed around, getting bullied around. They want to get meaner. They want to get bigger on the offensive line. And Aaron Banks was a guy that they had targeted, a guy they had circled. So that's how the contract, where we're at. In 2026, the big conversation point for me is this $9.5 million roster bonus. So how this works is on the third day of the league year, remember, the 2026 league year doesn't technically start until March 11th. and that is day one. So you got the 11th, 12th, 13th. So March 13th, which is the Friday, if he is on the roster on that day, by the end of the day, they need to pay him $9.5 million. It won't all be at once. It's like, I'd have to go back and look in his actual contract, but it's usually like 2 or 3 lump sums. But as soon as it triggers, they can't touch it. They can't move it. They can't say, oops, never mind. Can we lower your amount? So that kind of puts an accelerator on this contract for any type of decision that the Packers are going to want to make with Aaron Banks. They're going to have a very key decision done before that March 13th deadline. Because simply put, there's no way that they're going to pay this bonus or be obligated to pay this bonus and then cut him or trade him or come to him with a restructure or a pay cut after that date, because again, that net roster bonus is locked in. Also, with a trade, again, past that deadline, past that March 13th deadline, they can't trade this amount away. It is officially the Packers' obligation and liability, and that is not something that can be pushed or traded to a new team. So that's why when we're looking at the decisions that the Packers have, this will be one of the very early decisions of like what they're going to be doing. But before I want to talk about like each of their actual options with Aaron Banks specifically, I kind of want to look at guys who are not Aaron Banks, if that makes sense, on the offensive line that kind of lead into the calculus, the overall calculus that the Packers are facing with what to do with Aaron Banks. And we got 3 other guys that are going to be key names this offseason. We have Elgton Jenkins, we have Rasheed Walker, and we have Sean Rhyan, right? Elgton Jenkins is almost certainly going to be cut for salary cap purposes. I've talked about this in all my other videos that I've had out there. You know, the Packers will get $20 million if and when he is removed from the roster. He will not be back. Rasheed Walker also won't be back. He is one of the top free agents available in the entire free agency class, the top offensive lineman available. He's going to sign somewhere else and get $1 billion, and the Packers will get a compensatory pick for his services being signed elsewhere. That's another starter who is likely gone. Sean Ryan's a big question mark of whether or not the Packers even want him back and whether or not he even wants to return to the Packers. But if, let's say in a world, all 3 of these guys leave, that's 3 starting caliber players on the offensive line who might not be here in 2026 from last year. Can the Packers even afford to think about moving on from a 4th, right? With Aaron Banks. They don't have a lot of depth. They don't have a lot of talent, just kind of waiting in the wings here. Like jars on the shelf is always the common analogy. The offensive line depth has been a problem this year. They don't really necessarily have the guys, and they don't have the resources, right? We don't have, we got limited draft picks this season as compared to the previous like 3 or 4 seasons where Goody's had 11, 12, 13 picks in the draft. It's been insane. And we don't have that premium first round pick that we're dealing with either this year or next year. So, and obviously we got the salary cap constraints. They're working kind of from behind. We need to make these moves just to get into the positive, to be able to get cap compliant, and then even make more moves to be able to sign other guys. There's just limited resources. There's limited options to find replacements on the offensive line for these 3 guys alone. Are we going to add a 4th to that equation? I don't know. And I think that's a really big question that is maybe being a little bit overlooked. Maybe ideally the contract isn't great and he's not living up to the value of that contract. But at the end of the day, like it becomes, a body situation, a replacement, and of course, going back to what I saw and said earlier with this contract is telling me Goody really believed in him, and maybe they're thinking that let's see how year 2 goes. Let's see how year 3 goes. But let's actually dive into the options. I'm going to pull up his contract in this view, and then I'm going to pull up kind of this checklist that I derive. So when I think about any player and what the Packers can do, these are kind of like the 9 things that kind of come to mind. So let's just kind of go through them in order first, just as they're listed. I'll kind of just do a high level, then I'll explain what the numbers are. So release just means, we're going to cut them, no longer on the team. The post June 1 release is a mechanism where either you actually release the player after June 1st, or each team is given 2 designated players transactions that after the start of the league year, if you release them, they count on the cap as if you did release them after June. But there's some caveats there in that the player still counts on your roster limit until June 1st, and you have to hold their contract on the books for salary cap purposes through June 1st. So you don't even get the savings until June, well past free agency, well past the draft. And the Packers historically do not do these. They avoid them. The biggest example I have is Jair Alexander in 2025. The Packers actually added steps to their process and had Jair sign kind of a funky last minute clause in his contract to move things around to prevent that delayed treatment. They took all the hit all at once. Obviously, you can trade a player. You can post June 1 trade, which again would have consequences similar to the post June 1 release. In my last video, I spoke about the differences between simple restructures and max void restructures, where we're just pushing the money around within the same year. You can offer a pay cut, and I think that's a very interesting option, and I'll talk about that one definitely. Extending, and probably not on the table, or the good old fashioned do nothing. So let's just go through the math here. With a release, so right now, Aaron Banks' contract, his salary cap is coming up to $24.8 million. And there's $20.25 million dead cap, meaning if they were to release him, that he would count $20.25 million on the books this year, even if released. And the reason for that, it's the 3 remaining years of his signing bonus that has not yet been counted. Remember, he signed a 4-year contract, and that signing bonus was, I believe, $27 million was spread over 4 years. Now, if he were to be gone, all that rushes back into this year. So it's only a cap savings of $4.5 million this season. But of course, all this other money would come off the books as well. So all his non-signing bonus money, there's another $29.5 million into the future that would also come off the books for future purposes. But for 2026 purposes, $4.5 million saved against the cap. Not a ton. You would think for a player making $18.1 million that there'd be more savings. But again, most free agent signings are thought of as like 2-year deals, and then let's see what happens. Very, very, very rare to sign a massive kind of free agent contract and move away after 1 year, because usually the cap savings is very low, or even many times actually negative savings. It would actually cost more to move on. In a post June 1 scenario, the math works out where the dead cap this year is only this year's signing bonus, so only the 6.7, and then next year the future years would hit. So that's where this 13.5 comes from for this next year dead cap. So by only taking a dead cap of the 6.75 this year, the savings would be $18 million for this year, noting that then next year they're going to start off with a $13.5 million hole on this contract alone. Like I said, the Packers typically are not going to do post June 1 designations. And I'll say this again, this roster bonus is due March 13th. There's no way that they're going to actually wait to June 1 because this will trigger months before that. So this would be a case where they would have to use one of their 2 designations to say, okay, we're going to treat Aaron Banks as if we did a June 1 cut, hold him and the contract on the books until June 1, and then it falls off. But again, if you're looking for cap dollars, immediate cap dollars, when the team needs it during free agency, during the draft, this really isn't going to help them. The numbers for a trade are exactly the same. And for the way the Packers structure their contracts, almost exclusively, the trade numbers are almost going to mirror the cut scenarios, almost 1-to-1. The only real difference there is if there be any guaranteed salaries, and the Packers typically do not guarantee salaries unless you're Jordan Love or Micah Parsons or a first-round draft pick. So the numbers for a trade or a post-June 1 trade are identical. Simple restructure. Again, I spoke about this in the previous video, where we can take this roster bonus and we can take the excess base salary. His minimum salary, I believe, was like $1.215 million. If you were to take this and zero out this bonus and reduce the base salary to the minimum and just call it a signing bonus and push it off into the future, similar to like the examples I had previously given, they can easily, with a stroke of a pen, just create $10 million, $10.7 million this season. If they were to add void years and do the max, that jumps up to 12.8. The issue with that, in my mind, let's say you have Aaron Banks and now you have a simple restructure, and this is kind of a visualization of that. So the roster bonus goes to 0, and you have the restructure over the rest of the 3 years. Yeah, your salary cap goes from 24.8 down to 14.2, but now your future caps are significantly higher, and your dead cap to move on from him next year. A lot of people are thinking, well, maybe we'll give him one more year this year and then we'll kind of get rid of him in 2027. Well, now moving on from 2027 is that much more expensive in terms of immediate cap savings, because now, instead of it, as opposed to doing nothing, because you go from a $22 million cap charge with $13 million dead cap to a $27 million cap charge with a $24 million. So you're actually like the in-year savings is actually less next year if you were to do this. So it's not like, we'll create a little bit more saving opportunity for the immediate year. It actually makes it worse. And then if you do a full void, the numbers get even worse. Next year would actually be a net negative. So you'd have a salary cap charge of 25 million versus a dead cap of 26. And the reason that there'd be 26 is you have these 2 years of signing bonus and then all these years, 4 years of restructure. That's how you get that 26.28 million here. So that would be an actual negative. What is that? Yeah. Negative 841K. So people and fans are already talking about moving on from Aaron Banks now. So the idea of restructuring it and then moving on from him next year even more painful seems difficult, to say the least. So let's go back to the options. Okay, a pay cut. You can approach Aaron Banks with a pay cut. It's not as simple as just asking and then, seeing what he says, right? If a team is going to approach a player for a pay cut, the team has to have in their back pocket the willingness or the threat, the believable threat that you'd be willing to move on from them if they say no. Okay, let's go back to this scenario, okay? We have 3 existing starters who are likely not going to be here. Maybe Sean Rhyan sticks around. I don't know if the Packers can believably say, yeah, we're going to move on from you if you don't take a pay cut, is kind of the first issue with that. The second is, I don't think Aaron Banks needs to take a pay cut, because while he is getting a lot of money, $18.1 million. So let's say the Packers say, you need to take a pay cut, and he says no, and they say, okay, we're going to cut you, and he says, okay. He becomes a free agent. Aaron Banks is getting $18.1 million this offseason, right? He would become one of the top offensive linemen available, and someone's going to pay him a bunch of money, and it's probably going to be more than $18.1 million. So he really doesn't have a reason to be like, yeah, I hear you guys, like, I didn't really live up to it. And, maybe I'll shave, 10 million off or add some incentives on instead. No, his agent's just going to laugh at that notion. And he's going to say, absolutely not. So I don't even think a pay cut's even possible or reasonable. An extension, like, again, we're already talking about moving on from Aaron Banks. Yeah, in theory, we could add some more years on and push out, drop his base salary, give him a big signing bonus, and the actual cap number would come down, but the cash would probably skyrocket. Like, it's just, I don't even want to waste time talking about it. They're not extending him. I honestly think that at the end of the day, when we're looking at all of these options and all the things that the Packers could do, I think doing nothing is the most reasonable option. I think that they're going to go into this season and they're not going to touch his contract at all. Or if they do, maybe a small amount. Because I think that, again, going back to those things that I say, Goody really wanted him. I think they really believed in him. And there's not a lot of room to maybe shave it back this year. I don't think a pay cut's an option. And I think they're going to ride with what they have. I think they're going to have him out there, be the starting left guard, and, prioritize center, prioritize maybe right guard and depth across the line. Remember, Zach Tom's also coming back from a pretty nasty injury. He might not even be available week 1 or, a few weeks into the season, and who knows how he's going to look when he is out there. Those patellar tendons are nasty, even though it's only a partial tear. It's still pretty rough. Potential returning from that injury. I just think there's too many question marks and there's too much rebuilding that they need behind their current kind of second line of defense with all those starters leaving, that they don't have room for to like tear it down to the absolute studs. And so I think Aaron Banks is going to stay there. I think he's going to be the guy who is starting week 1, protecting Jordan Love from the interior. And I'm hoping he does fantastic. And, by this time next year, we're thinking about 2027. Aaron Banks is just a solid rock star for the Packers on the interior. That can happen. We'll see. Otherwise, maybe a year from now, we'll be having a similar video coming out. But let me know what you guys think. Am I crazy? Do you think that, everything I said, they should still think about just doing a release straight up? I still think, I'm going to hedge a little bit. There's an opportunity where maybe they do a little bit of restructure. Again, more of if there's someone that they're really trying to target in free agency and they need a lot of quick cash, his is one of the contracts that they can get a lot of cash very quickly from his deal by just doing a restructure. So maybe they do that and they just really are tripling down on the guy that they saw on tape in evaluation in their pro personnel. Goody usually doesn't miss this hard, so let's see how it goes. But, let me know what you think, and I will talk to you guys next time. Thank you.